Geena Davis is back on cue. Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Nice to see you. Congrats on the book.
Thank you so much.
I feel like Canadians can really relate to the idea of dying of politeness.
Somebody mentioned that to me today that Canadians are famous for being super polite.
Yeah, that seems to be the stereotype around us. A lot of sorries and that kind of thing. But you were pretty polite you were pretty polite the whole way up, but especially as a kid, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it wasn't just polite as in saying please and thank you. It was the goal in my family evidently was to never have any needs, never cause anybody any trouble, to hide everything that's any troublesome and not talk about things. I mean, New Englanders are kind of famous for not talking about things.
Give me an example of that. Like, what would happen that would, and instead of dealing with it the way you'd want to deal with it, you deal with it in a polite way.
Well, let's see. Well, one example that happened to me was when I was quite young, and my parents were reading the newspaper, and I was looking at a magazine, and I saw yet another ad for tampons, which at that time only said keeps you feeling fresh or things like that. And I was always like, why don't they say what it is? So I said, what the heck is a tampon anyway? And my dad threw the newspaper up over his face. And my mom said, I will tell you later. But she never did.
Oh, she never did tell you what it was?
No, 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 because we're going to talk about stuff.
Of course not. What kind of kid were you? Were you the kind of kid that wanted to know about this stuff? Were you different? Could you tell you were different?
Different from them. I mean, I don't know that I knew it was a thing yet. I think I bought into the whole deal that you should, be seen and not heard, and all that kind of thing, and yes, and not stand out, which was very difficult because I was, always the tallest kid in class. So it became nearly impossible not to stand out, but I tried my best.
And you talk in the book about how you knew very early that you wanted to be an actor. Can you
Right.
tell me that story?
Well, I don't remember saying this, but my parents told me that I announced when I was 3 years old that I was going to be in movies. And so I can't tell you what I might have seen. I can't imagine what I might have seen that made me even know that was a job you could get later on. But it never wavered, and that was always, always, always the goal.
You knew early on that you liked the attention, you liked the performance of it, you liked the art of it, the active
Well,
acting.
right. I definitely don't think I liked the attention of it. I think I didn't even really think about that or know about that. I think I liked the idea. I mean, this is all in hindsight, but I think I liked the idea of being able to be somebody else because I was incredibly self-conscious and never wanted people to look at me or have watch me do anything. Like I never played sports, even though I was tall, because um, that would mean people would be invited to look at me. And so that, of course, begs the question, why do you want to be an actor when potentially millions of people will look at you? But I think it was because I would get to be someone else. And the someone else would be living a more free, expressive life.
Oh, I understand that the someone else that you are able to be through acting is the person who can take that attention, who can take that applause, can take that all
Yes,
that stuff that you in your own life were unable to sort of accept.
exactly, exactly.
Oh, very interesting. And then so it's a really, I mean, a really interesting story. So I don't even know if I would call it an acting gig, but let's call it an acting gig for fun. You go to New York, you start working in the Fifth Avenue Ann Taylor clothing store.
Right.
Gina, in the display window, I love this story so much from the book. Can you tell the story?
Yes, yes. So I was a sales girl there, and I was very proud of working at a fancy store, what I considered a fancy store. And I made sure I was very made up in hair and clothes every day. And one day I noticed that in the big front window there were two mannequins sitting at like a cafe table with little fake food in front of them. And right in the middle was an empty chair, as if they're waiting for another mannequin to show up. So I said to some of the other girls, dare me to go in the window. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't know what I thought I was going to do when I got in there, but I went and sat down, and a couple of people had been looking in the window and saw me sit down, and then they kind of waited to see what was going to happen. So I froze and pretended to be a mannequin. Obviously, I knew they would know that I wasn't. But somebody came along and said, because I could hear everything through the glass, and said, what are you guys looking at? And they said, just wait, because they figured at some point I would have to breathe or move or blink or something. So everybody's standing there waiting. And finally, I did have to blink. And I didn't know until the moment I was in the window that I have a sort of uncanny ability for motionlessness. And also to go a long time without blinking. I can go maybe 3 or 4 minutes without blinking.
What, really?
Yeah. So anyway, and then, so a crowd started to build, because then I'd freeze again. And now more people are saying, what are you people looking at? Because I guess I successfully looked like the other mannequins. So then it gathered a huge crowd, and they started hiring me on Saturdays, not to sell clothes, but to be in the window.
When you started to get that, when people started to come and watch you through the window, how was that for you?
It was fantastic. It was so much fun. I really became obsessed with trying to completely fool them, because after a little while, I heard somebody say, "It's not fake. It's not. I mean, it's not a mannequin. It's real. It has hair on its arms."
Yeah.
And after that, it did not have hair on its arms. And I figured out that if I tie a little brown thread around my wrists, it would look like they were separate, And part of the shtick was that I would move every few minutes, like a mechanical mannequin. And I heard somebody say, "It's not mechanical because it's not plugged in." And so the next time I had found a really subtle wire and ran it down my leg and off screen.
But did you like the, going back to what we were talking about earlier, did you get something out of it? Did you like the attention you were getting from it? Did you like leading it to acting here? Is there something you liked about it in that way?
Well, look, I was already obsessed with acting. I'd already studied acting in college. So it didn't necessarily teach me more about acting. It's sort of a very unique kind of skill, but it was really fun. I loved managing the audience, because you had to really time things correctly. So I would be not moving, and then if I started to sense that people were going to move on, I move, and then they have to stop and watch again. So
through the jigs and the reels of that leads to modeling, that leads to acting, and then I couldn't believe this, but the first kind of movie set you find yourself on, the first movie you start on is Tootsie, alongside Dustin Hoffman, directed by Sidney Pollack. I mean, what a beautiful way to start out in film.
What a way to start! Exactly.
Did you? And when you get on set, are you like, oh yeah, this is for me?
Yeah, I sort of did. I mean, I, on the one hand, couldn't believe it. Oh my God, especially because it's Sidney Pollack and Dustin Hoffman. But on the other hand, I really felt like, well, I mean, this is what was supposed to happen. I was just had this blind, ignorant confidence that, of course, I was going to be in movies, and so there was kind of a thing of like, yeah, well, this is the start of it.
Right. Yeah. You talk in the book about how you weren't. Dustin Hoffman was wondering why you're not more nervous.
Yeah. No, actually, it was Sidney Pollack.
Sidney Pollack was wondering why you weren't more nervous.
We did a few takes of my first scene in the movie, and at one point Dustin kind of stumbled into the door, and I kind of ad-lib stuff about, hey, okay, and whatever, and then Sidney said, "Can you come here for a minute? And I want to know why you're not nervous." And I guess because here I was a little bit improvising with Dustin Hoffman in my first moment of shooting on screen. And I said, "Well, am I supposed to be?" He said, "Well, I would have figured, yeah." But I think it's what you said. It sounds ridiculous, but that I kind of felt like this is the deal. This is what I wanted.
You go on to star, of course, in big blockbuster films such as Fletch and Beetlejuice and The Fly. You talk about all these in the book, and then you win an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for the film The Accidental Tourist in 1989. I asked Emma Stone this one time, and I wanted to ask you too. I said, does anything change? And you said in the book, you write something like, I went from being Geena Davis to being Academy Award winning Geena Davis. And I asked Emma Stone this one time, I said, does anything change the next day? Does anything change the next week after you win the Oscar?
No, not really. No, I mean, I have no way of knowing, for example, if Ridley Scott was more likely to cast me because I had that or not. There's no way to tell. But one thing about it that was really fun was I immediately thought, I mean, that night even, because I was so shocked that I won. Well, I got that out of the way, very, very early in my career. So I know, in other words, I wouldn't have to spend decades wondering if I was ever going to get one. So
you wouldn't be like Leonardo DiCaprio, everyone wondering whether this is the year that he finally gets one or something like that, right? Yeah. Exactly. You just got it out of the way. And you mentioned Ridley Scott there, so you go on to work on Thelma and Louise, which is maybe my favorite chapter of the book because not even that I'm a big fan of the film. I like the film. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of the film. I feel very uncomfortable right now. What I mean is the reason it's my favorite part of the book is because you talk about how meeting Susan Sarandon allowed you to know sort of a new way of behaving on set that wasn't in line with that politeness, that forced politeness we were talking about earlier. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, once we were both cast, the first thing we were going to do was meet with just Ridley and the two of us and just go through all the script and see anybody have any ideas or thoughts. And I had a couple of lines I might want to tinker with, but I had tried to plan out ahead of time, what insanely girly way I would bring it up. I'll try to make him think this is his idea and things like that. And so that was my mode going into this meeting. But from the very beginning, Susan was showing who she is. And I swear it was on page 1 that she said, I think we should just cut this line here. We don't need that line. And it sounds so harmless, but I was stunned. I had never spent a lot of time with a woman who just says what she thinks, without a lot of qualifiers in front of it. Like, this is probably a stupid idea, but and the whole experience was like that, to see a completely different way of moving through the world.
You had existed in the film industry very successfully up to that point, sort of trying to find roundabout ways that would typically please the predominantly male creative directors you were working with. While,
right. And not, this was assuming it would be unattractive to say what I think without apologizing for it. Because who knows what people would have said. I probably wouldn't have noticed. It really didn't seem to notice that Susan was saying what she thought. It was so ingrained in me that I felt like you couldn't even have an opinion in front of somebody, because that would be rude.
What changes for you after that?
Like I said, I had this incredible months-long tutorial in how to navigate through the world like that. And I thought, well, now I'm fixed. It's all going to be good. And I get cast in A League of Their Own, and I'm going to play a very strong, powerful character, and it's all good. So I mentioned in the book that when I got there, they had a driver for me. I had a car just for me to drive me to the set. And the first morning, the driver had the air conditioning on set at full blast, as cold and blowing as possible. And I didn't say anything. And then the next day, I brought blankets and said, I'm going to be tired in the car, so I'm going to just nap in the back and wrap myself up. for 4 months without ever being able to say, would you mind turning it down? And I was like, oh my God, I so haven't changed as much as I thought I was gonna.
Right. You have this moment with Susan Sarandon and you start to see another way of existing in the world. And you think, okay, that's it. I'm gonna be like that. And then you realize
Now I'm like her. Yes.
you realize it's different. It's I don't want to
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's more challenging than that, but it's
Right.
different, right?
Right. To totally transform the way you move through the world, it was incredibly difficult.
And then, I mean, in this book, I should be clear, the book is a lot of really kind of fun stories from your life on screen, but you do talk pretty openly and you do shine a light on the mistreatment that you received over the years. You know, a really nasty encounter with Bill Murray, which you write about. He's yelling at you and swearing at you in front of like hundreds of people on an open set. You write about being sexually harassed by a director in an audition. You know, it's a window, and this is, you and I talked about this last time you were on the show. It's a window into what women have to go through in Hollywood behind the scenes. So I guess talk to me about sharing some of this in this book.
Well, you know, I didn't get into everything. I told the two incidents that really stood out the most, that I couldn't let go of, and part of it was blaming myself. I realized, you know, that I should have been strong enough to leave that audition. I should have been strong enough to, you know, call my agent if you know, when Bill Murray screamed at me and you know, and all that, or walk off, you know, or something like that. But what I realized after the book is written and published now is that what I really should have expected was that person not to do that, rather than it's all on me how I react to it. You know what I mean? So it's all been, you know.
I think I know what you mean. You were getting some of these. You talked about these two kind of stories about this director who sexually harasses you and Bill Murray, who is incredibly inappropriate and screams at you. And you sort of refer to it as like everyone loves him. Bill Murray is there screaming at me on the set. And you spent a long time wondering, okay, well, what could I have done differently? How could I have handled it? Why didn't I tell him to fuck off? Why didn't I leave?
Right.
But you're realizing, even after this book is done, you're realizing that just never should have happened.
Right. Yes, the point wasn't why you know, blaming myself. Why didn't I do the right thing? It's the point is the egregious way that they behaved.
And
really.
I mean, and that goes to something. I mean, last time you were on the show, I was talking to you about, it was at TIFF, and we were talking about This Changes Everything, which was the documentary that looks at I mean, at least we'll say the gender disparity in Hollywood.
Right.
And you talk about the representation of women in film and TV in this book. And I want to quote you here for a second. You say, "Here's my theory of change. There's one category of gross inequality in our culture where the underrepresentation of women can be fixed overnight on screen."
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm curious about. Let's pretend we have dominoes in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that fix happens. So that quick fix is
let's say what happens?
That one category of gross inequality gets fixed overnight, and that's the first domino, right?
Yes.
That knocks over. What else gets knocked over then, if we can fix that?
Well, then it becomes the norm to see fictitious worlds that reflect the actual population, which is half women and incredibly diverse. And because we can't just talk about women without including, you know, intersectional people with LGBTQ and people with disabilities with a different body type, older than 50, and that type of thing. So ideally, what happens is people start to see themselves more on screen, and that tells you your value to society. If you don't see somebody who's like you, you think, well, I'm not. I don't count. I'm an other thing. And then also the other side effect is that if people see characters do things that they find cool, and they see somebody like them doing it, they say, wait a minute, that means I could do that too. And and it will change. I'll tell you the best example of that from our research is we did a study. Fox wanted us to look at the character of Dana Scully on X-Files and find out, did she have any impact on people going into STEM careers? And we found that 63% of women who currently have jobs in STEM cite Dana Scully as their inspiration to go into that field. Isn't that flabbergasting?
A fictional TV character in a show on the X-Files is that representation enough of Gillian Anderson, right? Gillian in the X-Files was enough to have a real world impact in terms of women getting involved in STEM. Yeah.
The majority of women in STEM were inspired by that one character on one show. Imagine if you saw female scientists and engineers and mathematicians all over the place. It's astounding how impactful images are.
I mean, writing this book must give you, because the work you have been doing, how do I put this, is, I want to say like the work you've been doing is impolite. Like the work you've been doing is disrupting which is an impolite thing to do, not in a bad way.
Right.
But, I think you hear what I'm saying, right?
Yes.
That this is quite a journey from the person who was afraid to talk and afraid to offend people when they were growing up.
Yes, but I will point out, I do approach this politely. I figured out that as far as like the lack of female characters in TV and movies made for kids specifically, was completely unconscious. That when I talked to creators of that kind of media, every single person said, "Oh, no, that's not true. It's not gender imbalanced anymore. It's been fixed." And they would name a movie with like one female character as proof that we've achieved gender equality. So I thought, wow, this is utterly unconscious. And I bet the people who make children's entertainment do it because they care about children. So if I was able to come to them with the data about this and prove that they were leaving out the girls, maybe that would make a difference. And so that was my plan all along. I'm not going to try to educate the populace or rouse people's anger or anything. I'm just going to quietly meet with the people I want to hire me, and say, I know you didn't know this, and I'm never going to bust you publicly or anything, but it turns out this is the data. And it worked.
You go to them and say, I know that you know this, and I'm not going to make a public thing about this.
Exactly. And that has afforded me to be very linked in with like every major studio and network and production company, because they actually wanted that information. They're shocked that they didn't know, and they all want more information and all that. So that actually worked. I think if I showed them that data, and I also said, and this company has made that crappy movie that just came out that doesn't have any women, you know what I mean? So I do it in a very polite way.
Most people don't get the opportunity to write a memoir. They don't get to write down their life story. I mean, it's a rare thing to get to do. What do you learn about yourself maybe that you didn't know before?
This theme came out from just trying to put together, my life and talk about the things that have happened in my life. But what really shone was this not being myself, was limiting myself, cutting off my own likes and needs and wants, and then I call the first chapter my journey to badassery, and that's what I'm on. I'm on the journey.
Well, you say in the book, don't you say that, like, I can say that because I'm a well-known badass.
Exactly.
Hey, lovely to talk to you again, and I really loved reading the book, and thanks for making the time for us.
Thank you, Tom. That was great. Thanks.
Geena Davis's memoir, Dying of Politeness, which I believe is on our Currency, is out now.